You don't look at your email, so you probably missed it.
Yeah.
Well, when did you send it?
Early this morning.
Well, was it from you?
Yeah, it's for me.
This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
And thank you for joining us today. With me is Richard Fields and John Cameron. Gentlemen, we had a topic left over from last week about new research on the link between government and corruption. And I know John was very keen on getting this in this week, so we kind of kicked it over. John, why don't you all give us a rundown about what this whole study said?
Well, let me you put me on the spot, why don't you? I just for all you the viewers out there, I just woke up from a nap, so it might take me a while to get going. So we've always known intuitively that any kind of government program is carved out for the benefit of special interest groups, or if it's not carved out for them, that those special interest groups manage to find a way to get an awfully big piece of the pie. And some folks who are all members of the Federal Reserve, one ahead of one of the Federal Reserve areas, and other people who are high up the food chain in the Federal Reserve, actually decided to look at the last big trough filling adventure, which was Barack Hussein's Obama attempt to spend people out of a recession, and ask the question: do political contributions have any bearing upon how these the grants that were given out to businesses? There, it was grants to try to quote unquote prop up businesses because of the Great Recession that the Fed actually caused, which is weird that these people from the Fed are doing the study. And it turned out that 6% of the businesses that 6% of the businesses received grants actually gave political contributions. But that 6% contribution rate resulted in them getting 21% of the grants given out. So, there's a nice scholastic study by people who have a vested interest in showing the government as not corrupt, the Fed, which is the biggest corrupter of all, saying categorically that if you give campaign contributions to politicians and monies to be handed out, you're going to get a much bigger share than you would if you didn't. And so I thought it was good to see two things: that it was from a source that you would normally find pro-deep state, pro-government, pro-politics, which is the Fed. We could, if we had a 2-hour show, we could just have Richard talk about the Fed for a couple hours and how he feels about it, but it's only like a shorter show. Nomination that started in 1912. And if these people, it's 1912, right, Richard? Yeah?
1913.
1913, yeah. If these people looked at the numbers and came to the conclusion that you give politicians money, you'll get the largesse that's handed out every time they come up with an excuse to grab money from one person and give it to another, then I think we can pretty much take it to the bank, no pun intended.
Well, it's interesting. Whereas the statistical correlation that done by obviously a source that is unimpeachable in terms of coming up with something that's counterindicative to what their own interests would be. And
that's what I found wonderful about it. That it was, it's kind of like the thieves saying, "Oh yeah, thievery is a bad thing." It was that. Yeah, go ahead.
Anyway, the statistics are that if you gave to a political campaign, you had political contributors got 64% of all of the grants, and the grants were 10% larger than the grants received by non-political contributors. So, it's kind of a validation of what we've always known. It's a pay to play system, and if you don't pay, good luck. Bill Gates from Microsoft found that out way back when Microsoft was a brand new company and starting to gain a monopoly. The federal government went after it for being a monopoly. And prior to that, Microsoft had a very minimal lobbying effort. That all changed after the feds went after Microsoft for so-called monopolization of the industry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
well-
remember. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
well, businesses
You're a
don't
techie
spend-
guy, so.
Yeah, well, businesses don't spend money without a return on investment. So they're not going to go giving a bunch of politicians money unless they're getting something in return for it. And that's
Yeah,
something
and
that
if you look at the return on investment in politics, it's something like 100 to 1, depending on what study you look at.
What, for a political contribution?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, mine aren't doing me any good at all. I must be given to the wrong party. So I did give
Yeah,
money
you have to
to,
make sure you give to the winner, John.
well, unless we can forcefully enroll, which would violate all the principles I hold near and dear, all people who are small business owners and independent contractors into a union and assess them at the level of that the teachers unions assess its folks at. It's kind of hard to level that playing field. But I think the day is coming where this great divide between the deep state and those who benefit from forcing paying for their jobs with taxes and forcing parents to take their kids out of the home and put them in the classes so that they can inculcate them with the latest political propaganda. I think those days are coming to an end, despite the efforts of the unions. And I was hoping the Janus decision would do something about it, but anyway. And,
Well, John,
and they're huge contributors.
There's
Yeah.
been some hope in that. In the last week, the SEIU 1000, SEIU Local 1000, I think it's the state's SEIU chapter, has replaced their longtime president. The longtime president was 13 years. I forget her name, but she was there for 13 years. It was replaced by a young man who's said he's going to pull the SEIU out of politics. They're no longer going to play politics. They're just going to service their members. And this is something that those of us who played with AB5, we kind of maybe saw coming. We saw a lot of union members who were not happy with how AB5 went down and how the unions behaved, how unions simply ignored people. And so it's not actually surprising to me as other people. The question is it going to hold?
James, I have a bridge in the Mojave Desert that crosses a 100-mile wide river that I would love to sell you if this actually holds.
Yeah, that's the question: is the members going to hold? Because
Well, and then when the guy says, I sort of agree with Richard in that, and the problem with, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was dead set against government unions, and he was the big socialist of his time, at least on this side of the pond. But Richard and I have, on many shows, have had conversations about this, and I'm kind of setting you up for a rant, Richard. I think that any negotiation a government union enters into is political. Anything they do is political. Everything they do is political, because when they're fighting for increased wages or benefits, it's basically, how's that money going to come to them? They're not going to pay for it. The government is going to go out and take money from people who produce, leaving them with less money to invest in useful capital and give it to these employees. So saying you're going to remove yourself from politics they very well might stop supporting political candidates. I doubt it very seriously. I know that they're going to continue to redouble their efforts to control the work environment, working conditions, all the rest of that, to maximize the pay for their members, to make sure that nothing but seniority is in place for judging pay, and to make it impossible to fire them, and to make sure that the gravy train upon retirement is as big as it can possibly be. And all of those are political activities. They're lobbying basicui every time they negotiate. Richard?
Yeah, if you're talking about government employees,
Yeah.
You're obviously right. But correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the SEIU largely represents government service employees, but it also represents people in the like retail industry, people in the private sector. And what they're going to do is try to keep the extant labor laws in place. If they don't, they're quite frankly doing their membership a disservice. And I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah. No, so when they say they're going to stay out of politics, they might actually stop from supporting one political candidate over another, but they're still going to be lobbying long and hard, and the results are, again, every single time they negotiate for the members, because of the massive power of government here, like Richard said, keeping labor laws in place that prevent people from coming in as an apprentice or working for below minimum wage or working over 40 hours a week without double time or time and a half, or any of these restrictive things that make it difficult for businesses to run. The more flexible work scheduling you do, the easier it is to run a business and more profitable you are. So, even that. So it'll be interesting to see how long they go without supporting a political candidate. And then let's look, because this is public disclosure stuff, violation of First Amendment, but it's public disclosure, where their campaign contributions go, because they're going to make them. If they stop making them, I'm going to buy you the best meal that I can buy for like $12, $13, James.
Yeah, the large meal at a drive-up window, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to see that they were actually thinking about members other than the Democratic Party members. Essentially, it's what he said. By focusing on the Democratic Party, we were ignoring half of our members, and so we were going to get out of party politics. Maybe I should have been clear that he wanted to get it out of party politics. Now, I don't think it's actually going to hold, because their membership is their membership. We'll see who shows up at the next election meeting, and that's how that goes. Yeah. So we'll see how it holds. But there's some hope there that at least, even if the SEIU is starting to recognize that they can't be so hardcore political, maybe there is a little bit of hope. Maybe we've gone past the darkest times of the night. We're starting to kind of start to see the light of day. Maybe a little bit of hope. But then again, Richard, maybe not a little bit of hope. Apparently, they're trying to mess with the credit card fees stressed again.
Yeah, this is at the national level. There's something called the Durbin Amendment, which I think was part of a financial reform, so-called movement a few years ago, which made it difficult for banks to charge whatever they wanted to for credit card fees, the 1 or 2 or 3% transaction fee that they charge retailers. And what is happening now in a replay of the Durbin Amendment is they're trying to lower or even eliminate the fees that credit cards, Visa, MasterCard, et cetera, the banks can charge for processing those transactions. And the charge right now is going to retailers. So when you pay $100 to a retailer for a transaction, 3% of that goes to Visa, or 2%, depending on what kind of a contract they have with the bank. But going forward, they're trying to reduce that more. Now, the credit card companies, or the banks in this case, they have to make money somehow. And if they have to spend, or if they're making less on the processing fees for credit card transactions, they're going to make it up somewhere. They're going to pay less on, if they can pay less on savings account interest rates. It's already down to almost to nearly zero. Credit card rewards programs are going to become less attractive. You're going to see the foreign transaction fee come back or be increased where it still exists. The point is, there is no such thing as a free lunch, and there's no such thing as a free service. And what the politicians are trying to do for the retailers are the lobbyists in this case, what they're trying to do is give the retailers a free lunch. In other words, make cash transaction no more beneficial than credit card transactions. Politicians would love to see everything be a credit card or debit card transaction, because then they can track the money a lot more carefully, a lot more stringently. Read IRS. So they're in favor of it. But the point is, what really should happen in the best of all possible worlds is there should be no regulation whatsoever on the relationship between retailers, banks, and consumers on who pays the fees. It should be left to the market.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah, the consumer pays the fee anyway. The end consumer pays all costs. And so whether you're just kind of shifting around how you see that cost come out, whether you see it come out from your credit card statement on an extra fee, or whether you see it go on your Snickers bar costing an extra 5 cents, the end consumer is going to pay it regardless. And so having politicians make that decision is actually what leads to the corruption that we've been talking about here all day. It's just another way for politicians to, create benefits for those who give them campaign contributions. And as we've seen, even, in my own race, we've seen it where people will give hundreds of thousands of dollars to a campaign that doesn't need it. And it's, why? It's because it pays off. Clearly it does.
And back to the point Richard made that the like this whole thing about the independent contractors, was that EB5? I always get the numbers confused.
The EB5, and then there was a cleanup bill that's a disaster as well. But, yeah.
So every time a politician says that they're doing something to benefit the public good, what you need to do is drill down and find out what they're really doing. And in every case, it's putting people in a position where they're going to be tracked more, taxed or taxed more, and that's what AB5 was all about. And then also, typically, people who work full time are more likely, and not independent contractors, much more likely to be union members, which will give to government and promote more government rather than less, and tracking cash or tracking transactions and getting away from cash. I ask small businesses flat out when I deal with them, what's easier for you, cash or credit card? And the answer is, Richard, I'll let you answer this question.
I'm going to guess cash for a small business.
Yeah, cash is much easier.
And less expensive because you don't have to pay that fee.
Yeah. And then and the fees really, if there's a problem with fees and why small business is much more likely to be more in favor of cash transactions. I mean, cash transactions, handling cash, getting the guard truck to come pick it up, having your managers drop off a cash deposit, all puts you at risk, pilferage, all the rest of that. It's much easier. There are some benefits to doing non-cash, even at the restaurant point. It's harder to steal when people aren't passing cash over the till. Yeah, but the problem is that large companies can negotiate with a little stronger arm about the fees they pay. There are some massive companies that I'm willing to bet pay a fraction of that 3% that you're talking about. I'll bet you.
Yeah.
Target,
have you ever wondered? Yeah.
Target
Have you ever wondered why Costco only accepts one credit card? It switched from American Express to Visa recently. Can you guess why that might be? That they're maybe getting a lower transaction fee from Visa than they were getting from American Express? I guarantee you that's what's happening.
Oh, it's what's happening, and that's why whenever
that's not taking place at Joe's Barbecue.
No, I show up and I spend $600 typically when I go to Costco. And they ask me why. There's 3 of us in the house and 1 dog who doesn't eat all that much, but I spend $600 every 6 weeks there. And so I always pull out a MasterCard, and they say, I want to take MasterCard. I say, no, this is a debit card. Take anybody's debit card. And I think that gives you 2 messages. One, Visa has cut them the best rate because whereas American Express is despised by merchants because they charge exorbitant fees compared to other people. Flat off the top, they're always the most expensive. The other thing is to let you know that most people who shop at Costco buy their stuff on credit. You might pay it off at the end of every month, but the initial transaction is a credit transaction. Because they're always surprised when I make a relatively large purchase with a debit card. But anyway, we're going sideways. We've got some more ground to cover, and I'm taking it sideways. I apologize.
Well, we'll go back to some more corruption. Out of the Guardian this last week, we told a story about an ice cream owner who tried and failed to start an ice cream shop in San Francisco. He's $200,000 in debt and didn't even get his store open. I mean, that's how absurd the bureaucratic red tape here in California, and especially down in San Francisco, is that you spent $200,000 to try to open an ice cream store, for God's sake, and he never got the store open. And he's $200,000 in debt. And no one's going to talk about the risk he took to try and get that store open. But
well, actually, it doesn't. The stories didn't say he was in debt. I think he had the $200,000. The problem, the massive problem, is problem after problem after problem. It is exciting to know that his, even if he passed the permit process, which takes forever, and he had to get permits from I think 17 different organizations to open the thing, he still is open to his neighbors, some of them competitors, voting to not give him permission to start a business. There was another ice cream store that said, no, we don't need another ice cream store.
Yeah, it's called the competitor's veto, and it's endemic in California and states like California, and it's across the country.
Yeah.
There are laws that prevent competitors from coming into the marketplace unless the existing businesses give them the okay, which of course they never do. The moving industry, the hospital industry, and I didn't even know it.
Industry.
Yeah, I didn't even know it applied, for God's sake, to the ice cream industry. But there you go.
Well, I'm shocked that the nanny state of San Francisco. Now, if you wanted to open up a feces store there, you could probably do that because they have plenty of supply on the sidewalks with the homeless population. But and apparently those are unregulated environments. But if that ice cream store, I'm surprised that nanny state didn't just decide no. If it was frozen yogurt or something that's non-GMO with the low fat content in it, will allow it. But everybody knows that ice cream is bad, and it's high in saturated fat, and that'll lead to heart attacks, and it doesn't service disparate populations, and on and on and on. But it's that one story is that's why I like that organization, the Guardian. Why couldn't somebody like the San Francisco Chronicle or somebody like that write the story? It's pretty interesting that in this day and age, it can be impossible to open a store to sell ice cream.
Yeah. Well, and they wonder why life is so expensive. It's a perfect example of how everything is so expensive here in California. Well, if it takes $200,000 to not open a store, how much does it take to actually get a store open? Mm-hmm. So how much is your ice cream going to cost to pay for all that? I mean, who's paying for all that? Someone has to pay for that.
Meanwhile, the existing ice cream store is charging monopoly prices. You can bet.
Well, and apparently there was a viral protest against that store where they asked people to not do business with them, and that has power. These little protests where people in the neighborhood refuse to do business with a store and basically shame them into changing their behaviors, that actually works. It doesn't take too many weeks of an empty storefront or orders being down by 50% for the person to at least pretend to put on a different front. So it was nice to see that the consumers in the area understood that they should have a voice in what kind of goods and services are offered to them. That's an interesting thing.
All right, with a few minutes left, we got one more thing we'll want to cover. California's once exceptional public education system has been kind of taken over by extremists, politicalized extremists. We're seeing it in critical race theory being implemented in schools, and these various kind of, shall we say, non-inclusive policies, I guess is a way to describe them. What do you guys think? I no longer have kids in the school, so it's kind of hard for us to. We're all old now, and I don't have kids in school, so it's hard for me to care.
Well, all you got to do is look at the numbers. 50% of students don't meet the math standards set by the schools, and you can bet that's a low bar to begin with. 40% of students don't meet the the English standards is 50%. 40% don't meet the math standards. and the standards are low, and the teachers teach to the test. When you close the schools for a year, in many cases, because of a virus that presents very little danger to students in the first place, what do you expect? And when you are teaching critical race theory and teaching the 1619 Project and teaching all kinds of other politically correct but useless information, what do you expect to happen to people's ability to actually learn math and English and other useful skills?
And it's even worse. It's even worse for people of color, for poor people. Rich people have always had the option to take their kids out of public schools and put them in private schools. Rich people like teachers, teachers in the state of California, I think over a 50% rate, put their kids in private schools. And in the LA school district, one of the worst school districts in the country, that turns out people who read 4 or 5 grade levels behind what they're supposed to, especially Black, Hispanic, and certain sub-Asian groups. I think it's 60% of the teachers put their kids in private schools. But, you know, that's because they're rich people and they can afford to do that. The time of the voucher has come, or the tax credit, or the tax-supported scholarship, whatever it is. You know, give me a tax credit that I can use and buy my child's education somewhere else. And it's even worse because the universities in the state of California are no longer giving the ACT or the SAT test, because then they can rely on the GPA from schools, and they've already set it up to where they have to accept the highest, like 5% of the people from a high school in GPA, when that GPA very well might be rewarded for something like a basket observation or a treatise that is completely subjective on critical race theory. So it's gotten worse. And this is one good thing that it kind of in the ballpark. The state bar has just dropped the passing rate by 50 points. So that even more shysters can practice bad law in the state of California. So I hate to close on that note. Somebody say something good.
Well, I don't know if I can say anything good. When you focus on social engineering, you're not gonna get education. You're gonna get whatever the politicians or the social engineers want you to know, and that
because
is
you're going to get a bunch of angry people, angry kids, when they grow up and figure out they can't make a living doing.
Well, they can't make a living, and that they haven't been educated. The people have been lying to them. The people who are supposed to be there protecting them have been lying to them, and they're going to be angry. Why wouldn't they be? And that is all the time we have. Thank you for watching. You can visit us at libertariancounterpoint.com and get all our show notes. And from all those of us here at Libertarian Counterpoint, thank you for watching, and please remember to love everybody.
Thank you very much, James. I appreciate it.
Thank you, John. James.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about the evils of the world.
Gail, we're still live.